Okay, here we go. Thank you, Caroline. Baruch atah Adonai. Shir Shanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Tov v'divrei. All right. Been busy with Torah this morning. Let me click on that right there. Morning, Shabbat Shalom. Mm-hmm. You have to download it. There you go. Sorry, guys, just one more second. Let me just get the tech thing. It's like, get this. Okay. What's going on here? Like, minimize that, minimize this. Got to get this out of the way. Now I got to go to the. Look at this, Rob Rimberg. Look at this. Look at what's going on here. Look what I have to do to get Torah going on. There you go. Okay, Gesundheit. There it is. Okay, back to the ranch. Good morning, Yasala.
Good morning.
All right. Did everybody see the screen? Mm-hmm. I'm telling you how to make this phone. Why is there no full screen? All right. This week's third portion, B'chukosai, usually read together with the last week's portion, Parshat Bahar. But this year being the leap year, spread the third portion out. So now we have it all by itself. And it might not want to be all by itself. Let's just put it that way. I think that throughout Jewish history, Bahar B'chukosai are always read together, maybe because most of B'chukosai is klalot or curses. Begins with a very short paragraph on blessings and then makes its way. Now that the blessings are out of the way, let's talk about the curses. Okay? Well, it's not really like that. As Nechama Leibowitz points out in the name of Rabbi David Hoffman and others, the curses are very specific and the blessings are very general and broad. And that's on purpose because, as many commentators said, the point was to scare the Jewish people into saying to them, listen, it won't be good for you. Keep this way, you know. But we'll leave it to your imagination to imagine all the great blessings that could come. But with the curses, you won't have to imagine what it will be specifically. We're going to tell you exactly what it will be, and not one bit more. Just these things, right? Now, again, let's focus on the blessings. There's plenty of curses in the world right now. Let's talk about the blessings and the way that the parsha begins, and with one specific general blessing, which requires, which might be the whole thing, like one blessing that to one ring to rule them all, one blessing to include them all. And so let's look at this, the beginning of the parsha, and the usage of the term walking, and who is walking, and who's walking with, and who's walking. It's a very important piece here, and it'll bring us into the general question of a relationship with God. We understand her, okay?
All right.
All right, let's do it. Source number one: if you walk in my ways, and faithfully observe my mitzvot, and vasitem otam, and keep them or make them. Then, you'll have rains in your season. The earth shall yield its produce, the trees will bring its fruit. The threshing shall overtake the vintage, right? The grape harvest, and your vintage grape harvest shall overtake the sowing. You shall eat your fill of bread and dwell securely in the land, in your land. Vishavtem lebetech be'artzachem, in your land. Then verse 6. V'nasati sholom ba'aretz. And I'll put peace in the land. Ushchavtem be'in lacharid. You'll be able to lie down and not tremble. Ishbati chayara amin aretz, and I will make, any vicious beasts will not come to the land. Ishbati is like, you know, um, there'll be respite, right? Like the word shvita, Shabbat. There'll be Shabbating, for the animals won't come. Cherev lo tavor b'atzachem. You won't have a cherev. You won't have a sword in your land. You shall not cross your land. Or daftem et oivechem and avlu lifnechem lacharev. You'll be able to run after your enemies, and they will fall before you. Virat mikem chamisha mea umikem revava yirdof u'benaflu oivechem lifnem lacharev. Verse 8. Five of you shall chase 100, and 100 shall chase 10,000. Your enemy shall fall before you by the sword. I will look with favor. A lot of very powerful verbs here. I will. I. It's very, God says, I'll do it for you. Right? I will look with favor. I will make you fertile. I will multiply you, maintain my covenant with you. I'm sorry. She'll eat old grain that's been stored. You should have, and you shall have to clear out the old to make room for the new. Right? You're going to be so much. It's going to be so much. Right? The shelves are going to be so stocked. It's going to be off. I will place my dwelling, my mishkan, my holy place within you. And my soul will not abhor you. And then verse 12 that I bolded. And I will walk with you. I will be a God for you, and you will be a nation for me. And then it ends, I am your God, who took you out of Egypt from being slaves. And I broke, I crushed, I broke the bars, motot or matez, the bars of your yoke. It's and I walk with full stature, in your full stature, standing up straight. Right? This is the way the blessing section ends. It ends on a bang. There's like a little trumpets go off, like fireworks. Thus end the blessings. Now for the curses, which are then read in sotto voce. They're read very in whispered tones throughout in the public reading. What is the meaning of this vihitalachti? I mean, we can talk about each one of these verses, right? They're so resonant right now, and I have a gag order on talking about the Israel situation. So I'm not going to talk about it. I don't know, a gag order. No, it's meaning like the gag order is not from the board. The gag order is because I'm tired of seeing people walking out so upset with me. So I also want to be I'm a little bit tired of talking about the matzav all the time. Every 5 seconds talking about what's going on in Israel. Certainly not why I decided to be a rabbi. I'll talk about it for 90% of the time.
Some people stay with you.
I know that too, of course, Nikki. But I'm saying it's also nice to talk about Torah, like imagining Torah that is the Torah of living in New York City at this moment and walking in, having your partner, or your kids, or your job. I want to talk about God a little bit. Like, what's God got to do with it? Everything. Let's talk about God. All right? Let's have a God talk. And a God walk. So God walks the talk and talks the walk. Let's walk with God and talk about God. So verse 12, God says God will walk with us and be our God. What does that mean? So if you turn the page, just to get the first time the term walking with us appears in the Bible, we're in source number 2 rather, source number 2. It's from the book of Genesis. You see this? Where was this? Where does it happen? I know I have to move this 1 second. Multitasking. Rashi in a moment, but first, source number 2. And they heard the voice of God, right? Walking about, mitalech began l'ruach hayom, walking in the Garden of Eden at the breezy time of the day. Adam and Adam and his wife, life force and earthling, they hid because of God Betoch Eitz Hagan, inside among the trees, they were hiding in the trees. So God is a walking God. Our God is a talking God, but God is also a walking God. God is walking in the garden. What does Rashi make of this walking business here in the book of Leviticus? Source number 3. We're gonna begin our you guys with me over here? Okay. We have room over here. Just so everybody knows we're room. Rashi says, "Atayel et imachem began Eden ke'echad mikem." You see this? I will go for a tiyul. What's a tiyul? Anybody know what a tiyul is in Hebrew? A stroll. Yeah, it's like a stroll, a hike. Atayel, I'll go for a hike with you. I will tiyul with you in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden. This is a great phrase. Ke'echad mikem, like one of you, like one of you. V'lo yu mizda'azdim mimeni. You will not be afraid of. You won't be frightened of me. Right? So that's the first part. Everybody got that? Then Rashi adds, maybe but maybe you might become you won't be afraid of me. Therefore, the verse ends, I will be a God for you. Meaning, not only will I be your God, but I'll be as a God to you. In other words, the first, I will walk with you like one of you. And then, why does it have to say, I'll be your God? Like, most of us would just think, it's a part of the sentence. I'm going to walk with you and I'll be your God. Like, that's a sign that I'm your God. I'm walking with you. Rashi seems to be saying that I will walk with you is intimacy. I will be your God is sort of, but still, like, you still know that I'm power, like I'm God. Like, I'm going to walk with you. We'll be friends. Like, God, what if God was one of us? Like a schlub on the bus trying to make his way home. Isn't that who
Joan Osborne?
Joan Osborne. He was like, it's part of it's a bit. It's part of a bit here. It's popular culture. I'm like, who's that rapper? Lizzo. Everybody like, Joan Osborne. Okay. So Joan Osborne. So what if God was one of us? Like, just a stranger on the bus trying to make their way home. So that's kind of an incarnational theology made popular. Like the Buddha is right next to you. The divine is right there on the bus. It's almost an anti-transcendence, or the dangers of transcendence. Like, you think God is so far away, it allows you to treat the schlub on the bus like a schlub instead of like God. Who knows? It's a great story that's brought in a lot of different places, and I even found it in the New Age. Like it's a Hasidic story, but like it made its way into almost every New Age book of stories that I ever bought back in my 20s. It was about a monastery somewhere in the German forest. There was like a Christian monastery, and it used to be a very popular tourist site, and the head abbot, they fell on hard times, and the head abbot was very confused, like, why aren't people coming anymore? And so there was a local sage who happened to be a Hasidic Rebbe. Imagine Christians have the exact opposite story. There was the yeshiva, and then the monk. Okay. So you go to the rabbi, and the rabbi says, listen, I don't know why why it's not working, but I have a secret to tell you. I heard, like, it's a crazy story. I had a dream last night, and God said to me that the Messiah might be one of the monks in your monastery. But like, you can't, like, don't tell anybody. Like, I don't know who it is. So I said, who is it? I don't know. So two monks came and were fighting with one another, and the head abbot, or whatever it was, the father, said, like, listen, to each one of them, said, listen, I don't know why you're fighting, but I have it on. There's a prophet, the local prophet rabbi said, like, one of us is the Messiah, like the second coming of the Messiah, like God will appear as one of us. So, and they started whispering to each other, and they started telling each other, one of us might be the Messiah, and each one knew, like, it's not me, right, but it might be you. And so something changed, and the story ends like, all of a sudden the place became, luminous and holy, and everybody was walking around as if, like, I don't know, you might be Jesus, I don't know who might be. And like, all of a sudden people were coming back, and because it was the vibration, the frequency of reverence for one another actually was what drew people to begin with, and they lost that loving feeling. And now
it is the best thing ever said by Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, which is, as you do to the least of my brothers, so do you do unto me.
So this is the incarnational, like, that is...
It's the New Testament on one leg.
On one leg. Like Hillel on one leg, it's like, Thomas on one leg. The Gospel of St. Thomas.
A discredited saint.
Yes. Certainly. So we have here, like, that the beginning of Rashi is like there's no place in the city right now or in the world like that went straight from that gospel into the beginning of Rashi. So Rashi, I mean, it's right. So Rashi basically said, listen, when it says that God is walking amongst us, it's this intimacy. God is walking in the garden. He seems to say that it's something about a garden. I will walk with you in the garden, which is weird, by the way. Where's the garden? Is the garden here in this world or in the next world? Like the verse in this week's parsha is, "I will walk amongst you," and Rashi's saying, "I'm going to walk with you in Gan Eden." Yeah. That doesn't feel like it's with you in the moment. But let's just bracket that for a second because I think that is important. But he emphasizes that walking with you is the first part of the verse. I will walk with you and be your God, right? So he says, no, those are two things. I will walk with you, which is I will be intimate with you in the Garden of Eden, and you won't be afraid of me. But he says, but that fear is a real thing, right? And I still want to be your God, right? So the end of the verse is, and I will be a God for you, is not just, part of the agreement. It's about a quality, an emotional quality with God. God will be intimate with us in the Garden of Eden, but nonetheless, we will still be able to experience God's transcendence and other qualities that are not lost, even with God walking with us, right? Mm-hmm. God will be with us on the bus, but God will still be God, right? Which is right? It's not easy. Now, look at where Rashi brings this from. Like, so Rashi, of course, is what century, everybody? 11th century where? France. Uh-huh. And Rashi was a vintner. It was like somehow found time. He only died in his 60s, believe it or not. He somehow found time, in his life to write a commentary on everything.
So was St. Thomas.
And St. Thomas was also a vintner. There you go. There's something about this. So look at where he takes it from. The earliest strata of Midrash on the book of Leviticus called the Sifra, just the name of a corpus of Midrashic material that Rashi will draw from. It's earlier than Rashi. So it's interesting to note maybe a difference between the way that the Sifra framed it and the way that Rashi extracted it. Maybe, right? Just like those two things might not be the same thing. Look at source number 4 on the Vitalati B'dochichem. And I just want you to see if there's any difference between the way that Rashi extracted and then repurposed it and the way in its original material. Vitalati B'dochichem mashlu mashal lema davar domeh. There is like let's have a parable. To what can this be compared? To a king who went out for a walk with his tenant farmer, Aris, right? His tenant farmer in the orchard, but Pardes, also Aris mitamer milefanav. The Aris, the tenant farmer, was hiding. He sees him and he hides from him. Amar LaMelech, the Melech said to Oto Aris, Malacha mitamer milefanav. Why are you hiding in front of me? Hareni kayotze b'cha. I am here with you. I'm just like you. Look at me. I'm just like you. Kach atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'tayel im tzadikim. So too, in the future, the Holy One of Blessing will walk with the tzaddikim, with the righteous ones, the bodhisattvas, the saints, in the Garden of Eden. The tzaddikim ro'im oso, and the tzaddikim, the righteous ones, will see God. This is all very amazing, right? Because they'll see the God and they'll get scared. And he says to them, "Wait, hareni kayote b'chem, I'm just like you." Right? That's the first part of the verse. And then the Sifra, which is halachic midrash, had to ask a question. What about the next part of the verse that says, "And I will be a God for you"? Why did we have to say that? It could be that my fear will not be upon you. Budamar, the Torah teaches us, "And I will be a God for you, and you will be a nation for me." If you do not believe all of these things in me, if you do not trust me in all of these things, remember, I am the God who took you out of Egypt. I made miracles happen in Egypt. I'm trustworthy to be the one who will make miracles happen for you in the future. So that's the end of the original source. And if you want to compare these two on this page 3 and 4, what's the difference between the way Rashi reads this verse and the way that the original source that Rashi quotes read the verse? What did Rashi do in condensing this into like 2 or 3 lines?
Your buddy.
Right, so it's a buddy, right? So it seems like this is the similar idea. But what happens in the Sifra that Rashi did not bring? Right? The Sifra locates this in the future, in the Garden of Eden, and says it's for the righteous. Right? And Rashi seems to be saying the same thing. He doesn't say it's for the righteous. He just says it's in the Garden of Eden. He doesn't mention that it's in the future. We have to assume that the Garden of Eden is the future in Rashi. In the Sifra, it's spelled out that this reward is not in this world. The reward for keeping God's Torah is not in this world. It's for the future, in heaven. Right? That's what it seems to be implying. And it's only for the ones who keep, like the righteous ones, right? And then what does he repurpose the second piece, which is, it could be that you'll be too familiar, therefore it says, I will be your God. Is that what the Sifra said? The Sifra doesn't seem to be saying that. It's saying that, what?
Like an identification of which, a relationship, that this is part of a covenantal thing, not just the power dynamic, but
It's
really
not about the power. It's
Right.
about
about the intimacy of the relationship, the
And trust.
covenantal.
and trust and efficacy. Like, you are the one who can make things happen. Right? In the way that Rashi frames it, it's all about an internal experience of God's presence. Like, I might be too intimate with you, so God then says, "Don't worry, we'll still be like, you'll see my laundry, but there'll be mystery there." You know what I mean? and in the Sifra's rendering, it's not about, the fear is not that you won't be afraid of me, is not about transcendence, but about, I'm the one that you can trust to make the miracles happen. Now, what's weird in the Sifra, is that it's so confusing. The first part of the verse is for the righteous ones who are in heaven in Garden of Eden. Why do they need, like, if you're in the Garden of Eden already, you're dead, you're not in this world, and you're a righteous person, why would you at that moment be worried about God's power to make miracles happen for the future? So it's a little bit strange. Like, the verse is clearly speaking to two different audiences, two different outcomes. For all of us living in this world, we need to know that no matter what happens, there will be a reward for us that we'll be intimate with God in the next world. And while we're reading the verses, we might say, yeah, that's great, but in this world, are you still the one who's going to make miracles happen for us when we need them to happen? And to that, the second part of the verse says, yes, I'm the one who can make miracles happen in the future. Don't worry. I am God who took you out of Egypt once, and I will continue to be there for you in the future. But all of it, right, this is the way that they're working with this. We're going to move in a minute into three other sources that read this in a very different way. Stopping here. Yeah, Nikki.
It's almost like a parent.
Yeah.
The intimacy the parent can have with the child, and then will still draw back and use his authority.
Yeah.
It's very, very much analogous to that kind of the power dynamic, and where intimacy is both a prerequisite. It's like an expected part of the relationship, but intimacy that doesn't have some power differential can become itself a problem, right? Like, it needs to be. I need to know that even though we're this close, you're still mom, dad, or a parent, whatever it is, and that you know when to stop sharing. Right? It's like, I'm not your therapist, right? That kind of thing. Bhakti, yeah.
So for me, it's leading to oneness, because garden is a code word for Shekhinah.
Okay, stop right there. You can't give away the rest of the class. It's like, what am I doing? I gotta work. They pay me.
For Shekhinah than you.
Shechina's me. Throw this out. That's it. I'm leaving. That's it. We're done. Gotcha. Too good. You're too good.
Wait a second.
Okay. Yeah. Tony.
So speaking of oneness,
Jay, we're coming to you in a second. Okay, brother. Hold on a
oneness
second.
that in
Now I
a
know why I came
non-dualistic
today.
view,
No non-duality.
Okay, I'll put it
Unity.
aside.
We're gonna get there.
Okay.
It's 9:15. We got half an hour.
So one is reminded of Gruber's being asked, "Do you believe in an afterlife?" He said, and his answer was, "What do you mean after?"
Nice. So we'll get there. Good. It's nice to know that your students are like, PhD level. ABC. Okay. Jay, go ahead, Jay.
Shabbat Shalom. I have two thoughts. I'll share the second. I'm struck by both in the quote from Garden of Eden, in the Mashal with the king, and what was left out of Bechukatai, which is the dominant theme of Bechukatai, and that's the role of fear, and especially the way we tend to react to authority. It's like that old famous little bracha in Fiddler on the Roof. May the Lord bless and keep the czar far away from us.
Right.
Our initial relationship to authority, kingship, etc., is something bad's going to happen. And so I think that strikes me about this first part of what we've been talking about, and what we haven't been talking about in Bechukatai, in that it seems like one of the dominant ways that authority, notwithstanding our desire for intimacy here, we see as relating to us, and that's in terms of punishment.
Yeah, or consequences.
Nice.
Consequences, like, I think that often, just to be like pure about the relationship between authority and kingship, and the monarchy in Israel was modeled. It's not that God's relationship was modeled on the monarchy; it's the other way around. Like the Bible is polemically actually trying to shape a monarchy that is modeled on the relationship between God and the Jewish people, and that is power, but power with compassion. And that was unique in the ancient Near Eastern analogs, where the temperament was tempered by compassion, and yeah, it's true. God certainly is powerful, and Rudolf Otto, when he said in the idea of the holy that the mysterium tremendum is not reducible, is forever the Western analog of Zen, where Zen says that if you think you can tame, like, this is exactly the same dynamic that happens in transcendence and immanence conversations. Like, if you can own the transcendent, then it isn't transcendent. And if you are more powerful than that which is, infinitely powerful, then it also is not, infinitely powerful. And so God is indeed a God who demands fealty, and there are consequences. We can debate, and we should debate, whether or not there are ethics and morality questions around the use of or misuse of that power, and that's thankfully a very modern question. But I think for the ancients, not fearing God was not just not having fear of God was not awakening to the abuse of God, but falling asleep to the transcendent one. And I think that it's really, really important to remember that a God that demands that we behave in ethical and moral ways also metes out justice and is prepared to do so. Whether or not that God was just is like, that's also a worthy conversation. I certainly, Elie Wiesel would have a lot to say about that. But I think that that's one of the reasons why we're so angry at God in when God permits evil in the world. Because if you are infinite and allow this with your infinity, then you're asleep, God, and you're not supposed to be sleeping. You're supposed to be on watch, and we can't worship you if you had the power and didn't use it, right, to stop. So we kind of want it, and we want it in every which way. We want to kind of like be a powerful God, but like but be a snuggly God too. We want you to be like a teddy bear that knows exactly how to love and be, but also, if we do things wrong, can you just have a nice therapeutic conversation with us? But I don't know that it works quite like that. But yeah, Paul. But we gotta go. We got stuff to do, Paul.
So, as God is walking in this breezy time, which is an interesting additional piece of information, Adam and Eve are hiding from God,
Totally.
and God knows that.
Totally.
And so there's an element of incredible irony in all of this, that while God is walking and having making a homily to himself and to the world, he knows that his creations have committed the original sin of partaking of the tree of knowledge. And I'm not sure how God is managing all of this information. It's a very deeply conflicted time. And he knows that Adam and Eve, they are hiding.
Right.
And he knows that they are hiding. And it's
Sure.
Ali Oxenfree.
Right.
And also there is this theological moment that is happening at the same time. And so
Right.
we are presented with this unbelievably complicated and conflicted moment that we have to contend with. Like all things seem to be true at the same time
Yeah.
at this moment.
Let's come back to this thorny theological question of God's knowledge and so on and walking. But let's come back to it in the context of the walking with again and the intimacy with God and what it might mean as we remove it from its parable or the parable. We can start to strip the parable and get back to like phenomenology. Like what does it feel like? What's the experience? Right? What's the internal? We move it from the mythical to the more psychological or psycho-spiritual. In the mythical context, it's not like that's exactly the point. As a reader or as a listener, you know that you can't hide, but yet human nature is to hide, right? And so the God walking business is essentially that we rebel in full view, we hide in full view, that there's nothing that is not transparent before God in this method. Like you're transparent. There's nowhere to go. But yet our natural instinct, of course, is because when we are afraid, we think that we can be. The moral universe is not indifferent. Is that myth? Like that's the bottom line of the moral of that moral story. You can rebel, and then hide. But God is walking amongst you, and God will just ask you all kinds of rhetorical questions and get you to finally say, "Yeah, like what? Did you eat from the tree that I told you not to eat from?" Like God doesn't accuse us. God says, "Did you eat?" And they say, "Well, it's her fault." Right? So like we deflect. So so again, so let's go to the Ramban for a second, because otherwise I realize it's 9:20 and I want to come back to Paul and we'll really unpack that in a second. But let's look at the Ramban. It's very different. Ramban as a different approach to this question of what it means to walk with God. Okay? You with me? What does it mean, and I will walk among you? This means that my conduct with you will be well known, as when a monarch walks in the midst of his army, supplying them with all their needs. This then is the way of the simple sense of the words of the covenant, and it is true, for so indeed will he do with them. Right? So what does that mean? What did Ramban say? How is that different than what Rashi said? Again, my conduct with you, my hanhaga with you will be well known. Like when a monarch is walking in the midst of the army, supplying them with all their needs. In other words, the monarch has power, and they can see that. In other words, this walking with you means that you will see that God's hand is the hand involved in every element of your life, right? A clearly known divine source of moment to moment supplying our needs, like the way a monarch walks, or like cutting checks. Maybe like like here, you need this, sure. You need supplies, I got it. I'm the guy, right? In this analog, it would be God making the promise that the reward for you for keeping the mitzvot is that you will have a clear understanding of God's presence in your life as the sole source of your life, right? That's the promise. Walking with you here doesn't mean that I'll go for a stroll with you in the Garden of Eden. No Garden of Eden here. It's mamish, literally here in this world. You will have a sense that God's working. Like, frankly, that seems like a really nice promise. I wouldn't mind that. That's like a nice thing. Like, oh, God's like, oh, that I'm here, like here, what you need, it's going well. You need a little, right? That's a nice promise. That's kind of like, and it's not evident that that's actually the case. Pretty evident to the contrary. So it acts like a nice promise. Like if you do these things, if you lived in the world where you were consistently living Torah out, you would see God more clearly and more, actively known. Yeah.
Well, I say it also seems interesting that it's not individual. It's
Right.
about you're seeing God in the context of your society
Right.
and the needs of the collective, and it's not so much about individual intimacy, but about providing for the whole.
For the
And that
collective.
everyone knows, like that,
Right.
like
Family,
communal
right,
trust, right?
right.
Everyone knows.
Right.
The whole speaking
Great.
of.
So let's look at the second interpretation, because this is exactly, the Ramban is beautifully non-individualistic, more communal. It's about divine presence. Look at the second interpretation he gives, and it's slightly different. Now, Scripture did not mention here the reward of the existence of the souls in the world to come, in the world of souls, and in the world to come after the resurrection. For their existence, by the way, I just read through that. Yes, we believe in resurrection of bodies, right? Mainstream Judaism believes in the resurrection of bodies, and the existence of a world of souls, which is of course like the Olam Haba, the world to come, heaven. It doesn't mention it explicitly in the Torah. Now that's a problem. Isn't that that's the essence of everything that we're doing? It's for but it doesn't even mention it in the Torah. And by the way, in the Middle Ages, the Muslims and Christians, there was no shortage of people criticizing and saying Judaism was inferior because it did not mention the essence of the work. It said that the work was about the world to come, but the Christians would say, well, why didn't you mention that in the Torah? In the New Testament, it says it. And the Muslims say the Quran talks about it. But why is it not clearly spelled out in the Bible? So the Ramban, living in the 13th century Spain, feels the need to say something now. He says, right, is a matter of necessity in the way of creation, as I have explained in the section of kritut, on excisions, this form of punishment being the cutting off of the guilty ones from life eternal, and all the souls will continue to exist on account of their fundamental nature inherent in their creation. But by the way of truth, the mystical teachings of the Kabbalah, these blessings in this section are also heavenly blessings in matters above, as I have explained. I will walk among you allude to the divine attribute which our rabbis have called the Shechina, Batya, the Shechina. As in the word, I will set my dwelling among you. The Shechina dwells with Israel. In Breshit Rabbah, they said the divine presence was mainly in the lower world. Thus, the Garden of Eden and the world to come are mentioned here to those who know. In other words, he says Rashi and the Sifra are right. The Garden of Eden is mentioned in this section, even though it's not explicitly. It says, I will dwell amongst you. That's the Garden of Eden. That's the world to come. That's the soul world. It's mentioned as an illusion. Now, these blessings in their perfection will only occur when all Israel do the will of the Father in heaven, God, source, creator, and when the structure of heaven and earth will be complete according to its initial preparation and plan. There are no other blessings in the Torah as perfect as these, which constitute the words of the covenant of the conditions between the Holy One of blessing and us. Know, however, that Israel never attained these blessings in their perfection, neither many of them as a people nor as individuals, since their merits were never sufficient for them. We never did it well enough to get this blessing. The Ramban says the simple meaning of the text is God will be amongst us, God will walk with us, means God will be present with us as a community. But the deeper meanings are just like Rashi and the Sifra said. This is talking about the soul level, the Shechina level, the Shechina. Listen, look at what happens in the 13th century here. I'm sorry, in the 13th century in the Sefer Chinuch. Look at source number 10, 8 rather. No, six. I have different. Okay. What is this? This book was written in the 13th century as a book of explanations for the mitzvot. It's like every mitzvah is covered, every commandment is covered and given a rational explanation. Look at what he said. And through this, each and every house in all of Israel will have someone who is wise and knowledgeable in Torah, who can then teach all the household with wisdom. With this, the land will be filled with the knowledge of God. As if there was only one sage in each city, or even 10, there would be many people who would only come in front of them once a year, and all the more so the women and the children. Even if they heard their words once a week, they would then go to their home and throw all the words of the sage behind their back. When the teacher is in each and every house, dwelling there evening, morning, and afternoon, and constantly reminding them, they will all, men, women, and children, be careful and aware, and no matter of sin or iniquity will be found among them. And through this they will merit that which is written, I will place my dwelling amongst you, and you will be for me a nation, I will be for you a God. God's dwelling amongst us, the Shekhinah, means that there is wisdom in every household. And that if there's wisdom in every household, as opposed to a wise person or a sage in the city or somewhere to go in a university, that would be insufficient to create a society of wisdom, a wisdom society. The Sefer Chinuch says what it means that I will dwell amongst you is not spiritual, it's not mystical, it's not about the Garden of Eden. He says, I will dwell amongst you means that in every single house, there's a charge in Israel to have wisdom in that house. It's not a mystical future, it's a communal blessing, but the communal blessing is dependent upon creating a literate culture of people who are bodhisattvas, each house a bodhisattva, each house a wise person. So the Sefer Chinuch says, forget about all this stuff that, the spiritual stuff. When it says that I will dwell amongst you, the Sefer Chinuch says, and I will put my dwelling in your midst. It means not that there's a shul, but there's a rabbi or a rabbana or rabbah, a holy Torah-filled human being in every home. That's what will fill the world with God's presence. God will walk with us because we have in each of our homes wisdom. Right? That will be right a kind of communal blessing of wisdom everywhere. Now, I'm gonna go. It's like there's no too much. Too much. I put too much again, and it's too much. And
So beautiful, Rabbi.
it is. I want to just. Can we do one more? This one, and then we'll do Shechina. We'll talk Paul and about it. We'll get to the Shechina in a second. Okay. Let's look at this. Look at the source number the Sforno from the 16th century. The Sforno. What's his interpretation of God will walk with us? What does it mean to walk with us? What does it mean that it's reflexive? It means, and I will, right? The reflexive conjugation is hitala, like the hitalach means, and I will be made to walk with you. What does that mean? He says the meaning of this reflexive conjugation is if the Torah had written, I will walk with you wherever you are going, back and forth and sideways. I will be forced to go by your movement. Meaning wherever you go, I will follow you. I will walk with you in whatever direction. In other words, God says that God's benevolent presence is not limited to a single location or route, as it was when the temple or the tabernacle was standing. And only these locations were holy domain, the people having to come there if they wanted to experience sanctity and holiness. But rather, during the immediate period being ushered in at the time, the operating clause for such manifestation of holiness would be the words, where I choose to manifest myself. I will manifest myself there to the right. He's just going through why it was the old paradigm. The new paradigm is, sorry, a lot of this. This is the time of which Isaiah said, the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Where can you build a house for me? What place can you serve as my abode? Yet to such a one I look, to the poor and brokenhearted who is concerned about my word. Right? This is the paradigm of Isaiah. That we, right, that one second.
Nice sound effects.
I know, it's like about, where's it going? Where did the English go? Okay. שמע ונועדתי שמה לבני ישראל, אבל אתהלך בתוככם ויראה כבודי בכל מקום שתהיו שם. He says, God, the Sforno says in the 16th century in Italy, the Sforno says, the Rashi is the Garden of Eden. The Sifra is the Garden of Eden. The Ramban, Nachmani says, I'll be amongst you in the community, right? That's what it means. I will walk with you. And then we had the Sefer Chinuch says, no, it's about wisdom, right? That it'll be wisdom in every home will build a world of divine knowing. But more importantly, for the Sforno in the 16th century who lived in exile, I mean, all the others also lived in exile, but he's living in exile. He says, you know what? The exile has been going on for so long. You know what it means that God promises God will walk with us? That wherever we go, God will follow us. That in the old paradigm, it was about God's presence was about a place, but now God's presence is about people. And where we are, God will be. And that is the promise of Italati, I will walk with you means wherever you go, right? The Shekhinah will go with you. Now, the Shekhinah going with us wherever we go, and in this I'm coming in for a landing, two more Torahs, a couple more Torahs, and then we're going to open it up. But quick Torahs, okay? Like flash heating Torahs. Ready? Look at this. Look at this text from the Zohar, and then this text from it's how do I do this? There it is. Source 9, 13th century Spain. Zohar is the mystical commentary on the Torah. And on this week's Torah portion where it says, God says, I will not abhor you, I will not, my soul, nafshi, my soul will not abhor you. It says, Lebarnash dirachim lechavre. Dirachim lechavre. Like if there's a person who has compassion to his or her friend, they come to live with their friend. What did the person do? Brought the friend's bed and put it inside the person's home and said, this is your bed in your home, so that they wouldn't be far from one another. Like when you love somebody, you say, listen, I got a little place for you to stay. You can come stay with me whenever you want. You want to couch surf? Want to hang with me? God says to us, sure, I got So God says, the Holy One says, I will establish my dwelling in your midst and my soul will not abhor you. Behold, my bed is in your house. And since my bed is with ye or you, you will know that I will not separate myself from you all, and therefore my essence will not abhor you. I will walk among you, since my Mishkan is with you. Obviously, you will know that I will go with you, as it is said, since Adonai, your God, moves about in your camp to protect you and to deliver your enemies to you, let your camp be holy. Meaning, God says, set up a bed for me, and wherever you go, that's where I'm going to come. I'll come and sleep there. This radical move from the Garden of Eden, mystical other universe, that God says, I will walk with you, is a promise not in this lifetime, but after your life, or a communal promise that it will be a divine community to like, no, not only will I be with you in your community and in your homes with wisdom, but when you lose your homes and you're in Iraq and you have to now move, guess who's going with you? I'm going with you. When you're going to be in Israel, you move down to Babylonia, I'll be with you in Babylonia. You move from, from Europe, wherever you go, you're kicked out of London, I'm coming. You're kicked out of Spain, I'm coming. I'm with you. I'm a traveling God, right? I have my bags packed. The Shekhinah is like a very famous, the Shekhinah packs her bag. She has two me suitcases, very high end. Like the best.
But I don't always know where I'm going.
Right. So the
So-
Shekhinah says, I'll meet you there. Wherever you go, that's where I'm going to go.
Even if I go to bad places, you're gonna go with me.
Of course, it says in Psalms, if you go to the heavens, I'll be there. But if you go down to the hell, I'll be there too. God
Right.
says. But I think Shemayim, that's where you are. So look at what the travels and the journeys of the Shekhinah. Look at source number 10. Thank you. This is one of my favorite Gemaras. Look at this Gemara. Talk about traveling Shekhinah, the traveling Shekhinah show. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Chanina, my dichsiv. What is Rabbi Chama said? The son of Rabbi Chanina said, what does it mean in the Torah where it says, "After God you shall walk"? What does that mean? Right? Is it possible to follow? Is it really possible for a person to follow the divine presence? We were told that God was a fire. What does it mean to like? If God is fire, how do you walk with fire? You can't approach fire. It says rather. Rather, it says that one should follow the attributes of God, right? So this is, you know what? I don't want to do this source. Hold on, it wasn't what I thought it was. I'm looking at the next source. I'm thinking of the earlier Gemara about the Yeridos of Shekhinah, the Shekhinah coming down. It's an Avos to Rabbi Natan. I'm sorry. We're going to do this. This one has to do with following God's ethical and moral principles. Not this one. Let's do this one. Source number 12. Wait. Eser Yeridot Yarda Shekhinah ala Olam. The divine presence descended 10 dissensions, right? And then it goes through them. Right? The first time the Shekhinah came to the world was in the Garden of Eden story. Then the second time was in, right, my beloved has gone down. It goes through all of the 10 Yeridot. Now here it doesn't mean that it came down also. It means in each successive descent, it goes lower into deeper places, right? The Shekhinah comes down, you'll see, from the ark's cover to the cherubs, from the cherubs to the threshold of the temple, from the threshold to in between the two cherubs, from in between the two cherubs to the roof of the sanctuary, from the roof of the sanctuary to the wall of the outer court. This Yerida, right, of the Shekhinah into the world, it began to then depart, right? It came all the way down to the world, and then it started to remove itself from the world. And it started to depart from the world, right? It started to go back up, as it were, to heaven. It returned to its original place, right? The Shekhinah started to go back up, right? And then finally, it says that the Shekhinah was from the roof of the sanctuary to the wall. It went all the way back. The presence of the Eternal ascended from the midst of the city and stood upon the mountain. From the mountain into the desert, it is better to dwell in a desert land. And finally, it departed upward, as it says, "I will go and return to my place." And in this text, the Shekhinah leaves the world right? The Shekhinah comes into the world and then the Shekhinah leaves the world, right? But we said the Shekhinah goes with us everywhere.
She goes into exile.
So that
Also.
text, right, stands in absolute contrast to this Gemara. Gemara in section teaching number 13. Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. Simeon, the son of Yochai, said, Bo Urei, come and see, Kama Chavivin Yisrael of Nekadosh Baruch Hu, how beloved are the children of Israel before God. Shebechol Makom Shegalu Shechina Imahen. That in every place that they were exiled, the Shekhinah went with them. So the Avot, the Rabbi Natan, the previous text said that the Shekhinah comes to the world, 10 levels, comes all the way down, and then goes back up, right? Final verse, I'm leaving the world. But then the Gemara says, and the Avot, the Rabbi Natan is later, but the Gemara says, where it says, no, not true. The Shekhinah goes with us wherever we go. Right? We went to Egypt, the Shekhinah came with us. Right? When we went Labavel to Babylon, Shechina Imahen, when, right, they were exiled to Babylonia and the divine presence went with them as it is written. And so too, when in the future they will be redeemed, the divine presence will be with them as it is stated. Then God will return with your captivity. It doesn't say God will bring us back, but rather He will return. God's self will return, right? We will be there too. God will be there with us. Now, let's just finish and then open this with a teaching from the Ohev Yisrael. This is the Abraham Joshua Heschel's great-great-grandfather, who had the exact same name, Abraham Joshua Heschel. Avram Yeshua Heschel was the Rebbe of Acht, Hasidic Rebbe. And he's going to bring together everything we just read, including Batya's insight and a little bit of Paul's. Okay? Look at what he says. He says, let's go back to the first source, Rashi, where Rashi says that God says, I will go for a stroll with you in the Garden of Eden. And maybe maybe you won't have fear for me, but then it says, I will be your God. It says, my heart's insight is as follows. At first glance, what is the Garden of Eden's connection to the words, I will walk with you? Additionally, why does Rashi end with a question? One might think that you wouldn't have fear. Torah has to tell me, I will be your God. I will also be that which you fear. He then says incredulously, is that really a possibility? Would any creature not have reverence for God? He asks. Is it possible to imagine people not having reverence for God? And he answers, because in life, the inside of a person is the soul, and the inside of the soul is its source and root from the upper world. And that is its life. And that is known as the secret of the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is your innermost self. Your innermost self is the Garden of Eden. And it is the life and the foundation of even the entire Supreme Kingdom, meaning the entire unseen universe is also rooted in your unseen soul, but felt soul. And the Creator promised us, when we walk in God's ways, in His ways, and keep God's commandments, just read that any way you want. I'm just saying what He said. You can read it as being aligned with your purpose, I like to read it as being aligned with divine law, divine truth, divine purpose, the Tao, the Dharma. And then, right, if we do that, I will walk amongst you will be realized, meaning dwelling within your midst, which is the secret of the Garden of Eden. This is the secret of the meaning of the divine unification. This is the secret meaning of Batya saying this a half hour ago. She said what the Alter Rebbe said. She literally said, that does it mean, that's what union means. That when your soul is connected to God and God is walking with you in the garden, meaning your soul, that is yichud kuchabrichu. That is a yichud. That is what the Sodi, right? If you look in the Hebrew, those who think I'm making this up because I'm a kind of liberal rabbi, just wrote it in my own way. This is what the Alter Rebbe literally, this is what he wrote. Or he said, and they wrote down.
What excerpt is it?
Right, we're right here. We're in source 14.
Oh.
Zehu sod yichud kuchabrichu ushchinte. This is the mystery of the union of the divine feminine and the masculine, is that when we are aligned with the divine, we are walking with God in the Garden of Eden, meaning in our own innermost heart, in consciousness. And that's why he says, by the way, I know I'm writing this in the 18th century, the latter part of the 18th century, but that's what the 11th century Rashi in France meant when he said that God will walk amongst you in Garden of Eden, and I will be like you, I will be one of you. Because he said that's the source of all souls, is in that Garden of Eden that we are all in together, the collective and the individual, the wave and the ocean itself. It says, but what do you make of this fear thing that Jay brought up? What does that mean? Does it mean punishment and consequences? How does that align? How does your nirvana, your nibbana, your satori, you're walking with the divine, how does that work with being quote unquote afraid of God? What does that question mean? So he says, Hainu, al yidei godel ahava v'shashuim mizeh yichud. The question means, is there a danger with the level of ecstasy and bliss that comes from that unification of walking with the divine? Is that pleasant high? I mean, let's just call it that. You've taken medicine, you're on Bufo, you're on your ecstasy trip, you're on mushrooms, you're standing at the foot of Mount Sinai, it's like appearing in your own consciousness. You're there. There's no there. There's no there. You're just where? You're everywhere, whatever. As my 8-year-old son said to me yesterday, and I'll never forget because I recorded it, and I'm saying it now in Romemu. He said, Abba, nothing is something. And I said, or what does that mean? He said, nothing is everything, and it's nothing. I said to him, wow. I said, tell me more. And so then he said to me, Abba, everything has nothing in it. And if it becomes something, then it's not nothing. So it has to stay nothing so it can be everything. I said, or you got it. I don't know what you got it, man. So he says, is there some danger in walking in the Garden of Eden? Is that something unintended consequence of that, right? Is that Ikar Tanuk Shal Tzadikim, right? He says, if the in came nechtar is that Tanuk, he said, your love of God is only one part of this dyad called transcendence and immanence, or wave and particle, or emptiness and form, right? You love God, you're like in your love, you're walking with God in your heart. It's like the Shechina, Yichud, it's bliss. Your partner and you're just one. Say, but what he said, Tzaddikim, the righteous ones also want to serve God from a place of fear, which for him means the other, a sense of not you, of space. That if there is a collapsing into the Garden of Eden, we're walking together, but we're like, it's so pleasurable. Like I lose a sense of that other side of the equation, which is I also am not that. Right? So he said, how does that, that could happen? He said, that's the promise in the verse. So then the verse comes back and says, don't worry, I'm still be your God. Even though you, bodhisattvas, will be in the place of bliss, it will not completely distort your awareness of your own separate self, your own separate identity, and the inherent vulnerability that invites, right?
And the protectiveness.
And you're protected, right? You're with God, but like you're still aware of the distance, so that your mom and dad, right, together. So let's go back to Paul's question, then we'll open it up. So Paul's like, wait a second, they're walking in the Garden of Eden. God's walking in the Garden of Eden. They're hiding. It's happening in full view. It's God knows. So in that myth, that would be exactly the point, is that a generous reading of that would be that too much closeness to the divine scares us. And the fear is that we will no longer have agency. We can't rebel, right? We want to be able to establish as a child oppositional bonding. Like if God's presence is too overwhelming, the ability to then respond from your own will, your own I, will be, we're terrified. So we say, no, I'm going to die. Like, so we hide. And that's what they say. We heard your voice in the garden and we became afraid. and and of course it gets played off of the moral qualities, right? God's presence is overwhelming, right? We need a super ego sometimes, like otherwise. But it's also the same teaching, which is God says, to be able to be aligned with me won't mean that you don't have choice. It doesn't mean that you can't also have a sense of your own individualism, your own sense of other. But that's the promise of Bechukotai. If you walk in my statutes, you will not become automatons. You'll still be creative. You'll still have your own choices. You'll still be able to hide when you want to. But I'll protect you to make sure, right, that that's the reward. I'll protect you so that that overwhelming fear that you're going to die in union will not, right, will not inhibit you from yearning for that union or achieving it in some level. Union with space. So that's like the movement from the mythical to the mystical and the moral. Questions, comments, thoughts. Yes.
Just quick comments. Just the idea of fear and intimacy. Scripture, the idea goes, love cast out fear. That in true love, that this fear can be cast out. So just kind of connecting.
So that perfect love
Cast out fear.
casts out fear.
Gospel of John.
Rabbi, where does like Nadav and Abihu come in
What?
Nadav and Abihu.
So Laura's asking a question. So let's come back to Laura in a second because other people have their hands. Yeah, and then we'll come back.
Well, I just think the phraseology of hitalachti betochachem is interesting because betochachem implies within, almost like it's I will sort of stroll. I'll just I like the later interpretations where wherever we are, God's kind of hanging out with us, right? But it's betochachem, which to me implies sort of inside of us without the separation. And so that question of the intimacy with God seems to be implicit in the pshat, in the simple text itself. Can we actually be with God without God being completely immersed within that divinity?
Right. So that's always the question when the biblical mythical language becomes hyper literal, like I will dwell amongst you, which I'll have a temple amongst you, the sacred will be there. Like, oh, the divine within, like that becomes a question of it immediately raises the question of intimacy with God, identity, stuff like what's within me. I mean, my heart is me, and so is my liver, and my soul, so to speak, then is also, so to speak, me. Now God, so like the question of intimacy is inherent, right, in the simple meaning, right? But the simple meaning is not simple. Like that's a hyper literal reading. Like the simplest meaning is I will dwell amongst you means like there'll be a physical structure that will be there, right? But we were the ones who made it hyper literal because we moved from the spatial, ironically. So like, oh, the temple is not going to live in the temple. We can imagine God in our hearts more readily than God in a physical structure.
And then we have the nitzot and sort of this
That
mystical.
then leads it, right? So for those of you like, okay, so Beth, I saw your hand up for a while. So Beth, go ahead.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
I really love the way this drash has evolved. A while ago, we were talking about the criticism of Judaism that we don't have an explicit heaven. And yet, what we're seeing here today is that the world to come is the world that's going to exist in the next second, or the next 5 seconds, or the next 5 hours, or the next 5 days. That it's not something that's far away that we have to wait to be dead to be there. And I think that's so lovely. And It really resonates with me. Debarty.
Shemati, like in the Zohar calls the world to come olam haba, because the world to come is in the what is it, the present infinite, like the world that is coming. It's also the world that will come in the future, but it's also haba means that is arriving.
Yeah, Joseph Campbell says eternity is not later.
It's not later. It's not after, like the afterlife. So there is, of course, I mean, let's to be really intellectually honest about this. There is a full-on, full-blown understanding of the world to come as an actual explicit afterlife in Judaism. And then there also are mystical traditions, and this is, of course, you'll see it here in these texts and also in others, where that is true, and the mystics are the ones who achieve the world to come in this world, right? And that the goal, if there even say it that way, but to put it in that temporal sense, that there is a goal which is to be fully realized in this physical universe and not imagine. There was, of course, that tension that for the rabbis, because they didn't want to say that the Torah was speaking about the material world. The Torah seems to be talking about the material world all the time. If you do this, then you'll get rain, which means abundance. The rabbis found that to be very lacking. Like, what kind of God is that? Really reward to have a lot of food? Like, it is, of course, certainly a blessing, but is that the best you could do, God? Like that seems to be an infinite God can do better. And so they downplayed the concrete blessing promise, and they tried to upsell the spiritual blessing. But clearly, in this world, your soul is not divorced from your body yet, so you're not going to fully appreciate, Plato's bliss in the cave, right? So, but it's there, Beth, and it's really beautiful that you brought that up, because we saw the movement, right, from Rashi and his otherworldly promise. For tzaddikim, for righteous ones, we move all the way to the Ohev Yisrael, whose name is the lover of Israel. That's the name of the book that he wrote, the lover of Israel, Abraham Joshua Heschel of Apt, who says that it's about realizing it in this life, in this moment, and walking in the Garden of Eden with God. I think I saw one more. I don't know who. I can't read. Is it Ayala? I can't read that.
Adel.
Whoever has their hand. Adel. Go ahead, Adel.
Good Shabbos, everyone. I had an association while